Today, we're going to be talking about secure external sharing, or how to protect your organization's data while still allowing for external collaboration. With the introduction of tools like SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Teams, sharing and collaboration are now easier than ever. But with that comes the risk of the wrong things being shared with the wrong people. So, in this session, we're going to be talking about some of the ways that you can take control of your external sharing through policies, classifications, and monitoring to ensure that your organization can reap the benefits of external sharing while minimizing the risk to your data. My name is Matthew Dowse, and I'm a managing consultant at Catapult Systems, specializing in automation with a strong focus around security and governance in organizations. So, let's talk about securing your external sharing. The first step in taking control of your sharing is to know how something can be shared. Often the conversation around sharing is centered on SharePoint and OneDrive. But remember, there are other resources out there with the same sharing capabilities. These include Microsoft 365 Groups, Teams, and Yammer. On top of that, there's often more ways than one to share data externally. Most everybody is familiar with the ability to click on a file and choose to share it through a link or an invite, but there are other ways that data can get shared. For instance, if you add an external user to a team site or a group, that will provide them access to everything in that site. The same can happen with Azure AD guest accounts. It happens more often than you probably want to know. For example, say you have a vendor helping you with some Azure work. So you add some of their employees as guests in your Azure AD tenant. Then you add them to an Azure AD group that contains all the permissions that they need in Azure. Well, that group could also have access to SharePoint sites or Teams that that person doesn't need access to. While you trust the vendor, there is no guarantee that they won't be compromised. Just look at what happened with the Target hack, where bad actors gained control of a secure PCI network through an HVAC vendor. Had that vendor's account been properly secured, maybe the worst that could have done was change the temperature in some of the stores. But instead, they stole data from 40 million credit and debit cards. So be aware that sharing can happen in more ways than somebody right clicking on a file and selecting share. One of the biggest challenges companies face is balancing restrictions versus usability. Sure, you could say, let's just turn off all external sharing for everyone. That is the fastest way to get your employees to start emailing files or copying them to Dropbox or Box or any of those other cloud services. And once they are in those, they're out of your control. But there are some things that you can do to limit your risk. First thing is to turn off anyone links or anonymous links, right? If there's somebody who needs to share a file anonymously, then IT should be 100% involved to understand the reasoning and to help mitigate the risk behind that. So use domain filters to either allow or deny domain users that can share it with. So you can allow full collaboration with a trusted partner, but block things like Gmail and Hotmail. These filters can go either way. Say you can say all domains except for these ones, or only these domains and all others are blocked. You can restrict the sign in to the same account. It means that the guests must sign in using the same account in which invitations are sent. By default, guests can actually receive an invitation in one account but sign in with a different one. Even though the invite then becomes invalid for that first sign in, it makes auditing and tracking much more difficult on your behalf. Also, by default, guests must have full control permissions in order to share items externally. But there is a setting in Office 365 to allow guests to share items that they don't own. But I have yet to actually find a valid use case for this, so I always suggest just leaving this one turned off. Also, setting default expirations. Right? You can have guest access to a SharePoint site or OneDrive automatically expire after a certain number of days. This can help prevent against stale shares being left for longer than they need to be. Keep in mind, if you share a folder, the permissions inherit down. At the time of creation, there may not be any sensitive information in that folder, but can you guarantee that will be the case 6 months or a year from now? And restrict high and allow low. And what this means is that many of the policies and rules here can be overridden at the site level. This can be beneficial because you can set the default restrictions as high as you can, and When there are exceptions, which we all know there always are, you can override them at that individual site level, giving you better control over exactly which data is being shared and how. Now, these are all great policies, but there is one small caveat to them, and that is that they only apply to shares done through the share functionality. If somebody has access through a group, this will not apply to that type of sharing. This is where the next line of defense comes in, which is properly classifying your data. Doing this can help prevent unintentional, even malicious data loss through any means. For instance, by using labels and data loss prevention, you can add an extra layer of security around your data. I'm not going to go, too in depth into details on labels or DLP, as there are separate sessions in the summit that will deep dive into those. But as it relates to external sharing, they can be invaluable. One of the best ways that they can help is by setting files as sensitive by default. Since it can take some time for a DLP policy to scan a file and mark it appropriately, having it blocked from being shared before it is scanned is an ideal way to prevent the situations which a file being added to a stale share or being shared out to somebody who may not have would not have the permissions to it otherwise, right? And also things like DLP can help you automatically apply restrictions and information protection to files so that no matter how somebody gets a hold of a file, they won't be able to access it unless they have a need to and the permissions to. Now, securing your external data is not a set it and forget it activity. You will need to continually monitor your environment and what is being shared. On top of what is being shared, you also need to pay attention to who it is shared with, where those external users are accessing the data from, and on what type of devices. Right. So if you have some file shares that are normally in North America or Europe, and then all of a sudden you start seeing them popping up in South America or East Asia, things like that, right? You're going to want to be able to alert and find that information as quickly as possible. One of the best ways to do this is using the Microsoft 365 Defender suite of products. With these, you can monitor audit logs to alert as soon as a file has been shared. You can view where the files have been accessed, who accessed them, when they were accessed, and you can also create governance policies to use automation to automatically block sharing of certain file classifications. And finally, one area that is often overlooked is the protection of your external shares from malicious threats. The threat from external sharing goes beyond data exfiltration. It can also be an easy way for bad actors to drop malware into your environment. However, by using things like safe attachments for SharePoint Online, OneDrive, Teams, if a file is identified as malicious, it will be locked, preventing other users from opening it, copying it, moving the file, and thus preventing it from spreading. So if somebody tries to drop a worm or Trojan or something else into your environment, it will prevent that from being automatically synced down to user devices and help protect you against that. Uh, you also want to monitor what applications have access to your data. Unfortunately, it has been all too common for people to just click through the first few screens in an app asking for the permissions and accepting the EULA. But by monitoring for these, you can prevent users from inadvertently providing access to malicious third parties. Fortunately, tools like Microsoft Defender for Cloud apps can help you find and deal with these type of threats. So how do you take back control? Control the who, where, and why files are being shared. Like I said earlier, limit at the high level, but allow exceptions to prevent things like people emailing files. For instance, if you're working on a project with an external partner, you can quickly and easily set up an external B2B extranet. This way, the partner can only access the information that they need to do their jobs and nothing else, right? And then also classify and protect your information through DLP policies and information protection. That way, you know if something sensitive is being shared uh, right then and there on the spot, right? And then automatically clean up old shares. You can see in the screenshot here that stale external share files is one of the built-in sharing policies in the cloud app security. So there is no reason you shouldn't turn it on. And monitor, monitor, monitor. Don't assume because you created a few alerts and data classification labels that you are protected. Go back, test these alerts, monitor these rules, ensure that they are working in the ways that you intended them to. You can see here how with just a few mouse clicks you can remove external users from files that haven't been modified for any number of days. And the rules and policies are completely customizable to meet your organizational needs. And we know that it's not an easy problem to solve. We have worked side by side with Microsoft over the years to help drive data governance and protection. Unfortunately, there is no one answer for everybody, but there isn't even one portal for everything. There are currently multiple different places that you need to go in order to view audit logs or set up alerts for external sharing. To Microsoft's credit, they have been working to unify these. Most of what we have discussed here is available in the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, formerly known as Microsoft Cloud App Security or MCAS. But even that can be daunting to look at. For an example, if you share a file in OneDrive with somebody externally, these tools will report the folder and every file and subfolder underneath of it as being shared. The same goes at a site level. When an external user is added to a site, it will flag everything as being shared, even the PNG file for the site icon, which is true. It all has been shared, but it makes it difficult to make it human readable and make heads or tails of it when you're looking at a list of hundreds of thousands of shares, right? So this is why we at Catapult have developed a tool for our customers to help do just that. We have an external share monitoring tool, which takes the data from Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So we builds on top of theirs. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. It just gives you some better reporting and governance, and it rolls up everything into the individual share. Right? I have seen environments where we pulled the initial report of external shared files, and it comes back with hundreds of thousands or even millions of results. But what we have found is when you roll these up to the site or the folder in which it was shared is only actually a fraction of the number of files actually shared. It's usually less than 10%. A perfect example of this was one company which we installed the tool for, had 65,000 files shown as being shared in Defender for Cloud App. What we found was that there was only actually about 50 or 60 actual shares in the environment. At first, we almost didn't believe it, but then we started looking into the actual numbers. We found that there was one share with over 30,000 files in it. And what they found out was somebody was using OneDrive as source control with an external vendor. This is a prime example of why you want to know why and who your files are being shared with. In this instance, by learning that the files are being shared as source control with an external vendor, they were able to work with that team to get a true source control solution in place and reduce the risk to their environment entirely. So, for more information on any of the topics that we've covered today, the provide some links here. Planning file collaboration through SharePoint. So all the policies and everything that uh, were mentioned are, you know, by default in SharePoint online. You can also set up Microsoft Defender pilot to evaluate, and if you're not quite ready to start, locking things down in your environment, set up this eval and kind of play around with it, and don't have to worry about breaking anything, which is really cool. And it's a good way to learn the tool, and then getting started with Defender for Cloud Apps. Most of you probably already have this licensed, and just need to go and click a few buttons and get this turned on, and you can start taking back control and seeing the governance and applying the automation to, automatically clean up those old shares so that information isn't getting sent out or going to places that you didn't expect it to go. So if you're interested in getting some help evaluating your environment or wrangling your external sharing, please scan the QR code to the left, and one of our experts could help you out. Also, to ensure that we are delivering content that is relevant and helpful to your needs, please complete the survey on the right. This will help us develop further content to meet exactly what you guys are looking for. And with that, thank you very much. I hope this session was helpful for you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.